Hi, my name is Grayson Wade. I'm your Arkansas Youth Alive missionary, and I'm excited to share a word with you today. You know, when I was growing up and I was in elementary school, I wanted nothing more than to be a musician. And so I wanted to be in a band, I wanted to play guitar, and I remember being in second and third grade, I would go to school and me and my friends would get together and decide, hey, we are in a band now. And I'll never forget coming home from school one day and telling my parents, I'm so excited, you won't believe it. Me and my friends, we formed a band today at school, and this is gonna change my life, and I'm so excited to be a part of this. And my dad said something that at the time was soul crushing. And he looked at me and said, Grayson, that's great. There's only one problem. Well, I didn't know that there was a problem. I set all this up. I was excited. He said, the problem is that you don't know how to play an instrument. I didn't think about that. I didn't play an instrument. None of my friends played an instrument, but we were in a band. And so my parents, they'd heard me talk about wanting to play guitar for a long time and having these dreams to be a musician. And so they ended up buying me a starter guitar. And I mean, the thing was probably this long. I mean, it was just a little itty bitty kid's guitar. And it was really good timing because at the time, my church was doing these community groups and they were just around different interests. You could come in and learn something. And so they put on a guitar class, and it was gonna be like every Saturday at 10 for an hour in the church. We were gonna get together and a group of us were gonna learn how to play guitar. Well, as a third grader, I was so excited to be a part of this. I had my guitar, I was signed up for the class. I was ready to go. I mean, I couldn't sleep, it felt like, for weeks leading up to this thing. And the day for the class came. Now keep in mind, for me, as a third grader, somewhere along the way, I had convinced myself that I was one class away from being on the worship team. That was it. One guitar class was all it was gonna take, and I would be on the worship team. And so you can imagine how I felt when we started class. I got about 15 minutes in and realized this may take a little bit longer than I thought it was gonna take to learn. I mean, I didn't know anything. And so I remember just being so defeated. Class was done. I walked up to my dad. He asked me how it was. And I said, Dad, I'm done. I just can't do this. This isn't what I thought it was gonna be. And he really talked me through it and said, you know, you can't quit. It's just one class. You're not gonna be incredible after one class. It's gonna take a while to learn this thing. And at that point, I really had two options. Either I could just quit and walk away with, at the time, that's what I felt like doing, was just being done, or I could push through and keep learning, even though it was uncomfortable and it was frustrating. Thankfully, that's what I did, and there's been a lot of cool opportunities that have come in my life because that I was a musician. God's opened some doors, but it came back to that moment. It was a moment when I chose to push forward. Can I tell you, how we react to failure says a lot about us. It's true in our life, but it's really true on our walk with God. How you respond to failure, it says a lot about your walk with God. And the reality is that when we fail, we have two options, and those options are to run from God or run towards God. Those are our options to respond to failure in our life. I think about the story in 2 Samuel of David and Bathsheba. It's a really famous story where David, everybody's off at war, and he sees this woman bathing on the roof named Bathsheba, and he draws her in. They end up sleeping together. She gets pregnant, and David decides, I gotta find a way to cover this up. Well, Bathsheba's husband, he was away at war. David calls him back, and figures, if I can get them to sleep together, and it would make it look like he was the one who got her pregnant, I wouldn't have to deal with this. Well, Bathsheba's husband, he's a good guy, and he says, you know, I'm not gonna go home and hang out and just do whatever while all my friends are out at war. And so David realizes he's not gonna do what I need him to do. This isn't gonna work. And so he sends him back to war, and David comes up with this plan that I want you guys to push forward, and when the battle gets really intense, pull back, have them on the front lines, and we'll get killed. And that's exactly what happens, is that Bathsheba's husband, he gets killed. And it's in this moment that Nathan the prophet, he comes after David and pretty much tells him, man, you've messed up. And David's response here, it tells us everything. He says, yeah, I did. I messed up. And in Psalm 51, he really lays out his heart in that moment and says, God, you cleanse me. I'm broken, I messed up. David's response is important here. When you dig a little bit deeper, you realize what he did, even as being the king, he could have been executed for this. I mean, this was a very, very serious offense. But his response changed everything. He went towards God instead of away from him. Again, our response to failure says a lot about our walk with God. And I realize that David, he's an extreme example. I hope none of us, when we talk about failure or thinking about an affair or getting someone pregnant or having somebody murdered, I mean, those are some really big things. But all of us are dealing with things in our life that we fail with, right? There's moments of failure in our walk with God. And I remember what it was like to be a teenager. And I remember being in a place where I was vocal about I felt called and that God was calling me to ministry. And what that meant for me was that when youth group was going on and our youth pastor called an altar call, I couldn't be the one to go up because that meant that other people would see that there was something wrong with me. When we were in a small group, I was the one that had to add something that was deep and it was valuable. And so I was carrying this thing on the outside that nothing was wrong, that I was perfect to some degree, that I was called and that I had it together. But the reality is that translated to the inside as well. And it meant that when I did fail, when I did have things that I fell short of, what would happen was I would just stuff those things down, act like they didn't happen and just keep going on, or just say, God, I'll never do it again and keep moving on. But I didn't take a second to realize, even though I keep saying these things that I'll never do it again, I keep doing it again. And what I wish would have happened is instead of stuffing these things down and to some degree running from God, I just would have run towards God and said, God, I don't know what to do. This keeps happening. Lord, I need you. These videos, I'm sure that almost every single one of them are going to tell you that you need to serve where you're at. And guys, that's important. I'm a Youth Alive missionary. I'm going to tell you that you need to reach your campus. You need to see your school as your missions field. You need to be involved in your youth group, in your church. If you're called, you need to serve right now. And guys, that is incredibly important. But beyond serving, I believe that God is calling you to grow. Yes, serve, but make it a point to grow spiritually. One of the easiest ways to grow spiritually is that when you do fail, you run towards God instead of running away from Him. I wish that is something that I would have made a priority when I was your age. God could have worked out some things earlier in my life, and it would have saved me a lot of headache in the future. So yes, serve, but make it a point to grow. When you fall short, don't stuff it down and act like it never happened. Run towards God. He wants you to be real with Him. So I'm proud of you. Thank you for watching this video and being a part of what we're doing with Call. It's really exciting. I'm going to pray with you. That'll be it. So God, right now, for our called students that are watching this, God, make it a priority in their heart to grow. Lord, that when they do fail, let them be people that push towards you instead of away from you. God, I pray for every single one of them where they're at, Lord, that you grow them, that you use them, and you continue to speak to them in mighty and powerful ways. We thank you for what you're doing in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.